All right. Well, it's a beautiful day in West Virginia. I want to welcome everyone to this update. We're going to make a couple specific announcements, and then we'll have time for just a couple questions. But consistent with what we've talked about in the past, we're going to come back to you next week, and we're going to give you more opportunities to answer questions. I think that you like that. I think that the public likes that. I think that's important for us to do going forward. So let me start and say I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about how West Virginia is going to grow and get stronger as a state. Many of you have followed over the last few years where I've talked a lot about having a backyard brawl with all the states that we touch so we can grow economically. And I think that the reason I've talked about that for a long time is that I'm a believer in the power of competition. That if you start to look at what your state is doing in the economic arena and you compare it to all the states that you touch, you start to have barometers of where you stand and how you can be better at what you do. And along the way, as we were looking at the various issues, we know there are certain drivers of success in the business community. And so over the last few months, as we've been developing a number of ideas and also meeting with a lot of the personnel who would be wonderful advocates for the state of West Virginia, we came up with an idea to have a really specific focus on energy, infrastructure, and competitiveness. We know that West Virginia, for it to unleash its true potential, we know that we have to be an energy powerhouse. And that means taking advantage of all of our energy resources. That means ensuring that the price of electricity is very competitive. One of the best things that we can sell businesses is where we stand in that area. We know that we have to continually invest in infrastructure to that end. I want to thank Governor Justice's Road for Prosperity. There were really positive things that happened there, and I think that's important that we're going to build on. Obviously, now we're going to get to a point in the infrastructure, we're going to find new creative ways, public-private partnerships and other activities where we can continue to grow. But then we also have competitiveness. Every single day that I wake up and every day that our whole cabinet wakes up, we're focusing on how we can defeat all the states that we touch economically. And it's a good, friendly competition. I've already talked to some of the governors, our neighboring states, and I think we have good smiles and we're going to have good relationships. In fact, we're going to be able to work collaboratively with our neighbors on regional issues that benefit the state. That's terrific to do. But at its core, West Virginia still needs to keep focusing on the fundamentals that are holding us back. And we know that there are challenges. We're going to be developing economic metrics that you all can see, and we can see where we are today. So we're not just having rhetoric, we're having facts that you can look at and compare to others. For example, right now, West Virginia is currently ranked 46th in CNBC's Top States for Business, 2024. We're ranked 49th in Forbes' Best States for Business, 2024. We're ranked 13th in business cost, but we came in 50th in labor supply, regulatory environment, and growth prospects, and we were near the bottom in a lot of different categories. I want to change that. West Virginians deserve to have that change so we can start to really rise in the economic rankings. I'm committed to that, and I want to build on the base of what's happened to really grow dramatically. And I think what we're going to talk about here today is going to help make that happen. The key of today's announcement, of course, is to let folks know that we have a wonderfully talented individual who's going to serve as the director of this energy, infrastructure, and competitiveness effort. And his name is Todd Johnston. Todd's going to be focusing on all the different ways we can grow economically, and he is going to be helming up an effort involving not only people within the governor's office, but with our Secretary of DEP, with our transportation secretary, with our commerce and our economic development staff, in order to make sure that we're fixing the fundamentals so that we can grow. You're going to hear that a lot in the upcoming months. We have to fix the fundamentals in order to grow. And so I'm really excited today to introduce to you gentleman in our office, our Deputy Chief of Staff, our Director of this Energy Infrastructure and Competitiveness Initiative, Todd Johnson. Todd, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Governor. I really appreciate your confidence in me and the opportunity that we have before us. I think you've summed up the initiative very well, so I'm looking forward to kind of opening up the proverbial hood of the car in government here and seeing where we can make some real efficiency improvements and better coordinate our efforts with the federal government and get West Virginia up and running, ready for business.
Absolutely. Well, great. And I think Todd has phenomenal experience working on a lot of the regulatory and competitiveness issues. One of the things that we've talked about already within with the cabinet secretaries and with Todd is that we're looking for ways to accelerate permit application approvals, right? That's critical. That's something that will involve both state and federal authorities. You know, maybe you're looking at a Section 404 permit, or you're looking at some of the water permits or the air permits. We know that there's a certain amount of time that it takes in order to get those things approved. And some of that may be on the state level. Some of that may be on the federal level. The goal of this effort is to identify things, number one, that we could fix directly, that we uniquely control, but also to build on the partnership that we're going to have with the Trump administration, because they are looking for different ways to be very aggressive on reducing regulations and red tape. And so that's going to be very important for us. And so I know that when it comes to permit approval, that's an area I think we can keep making improvements in and work with the federal government to make sure that we have first in the nation type of quality and also review times. That's going to be important. So we're looking at all these issues. We already know that some of the states that we touch, you know, have been doing some things for a while that have been effective. You know, we were looking at some of what Pennsylvania has done in terms of accelerating permit approvals and to have one-stop shopping. I think that we should be looking at all those things and then, once again, try to be better than all the states that we touch. That's the goal. That's behind what we're trying to accomplish. The other piece that we're looking forward to doing is engaging with the business community. Now, I'm really grateful a number of members of the business community are here today. I also want to announce that in March, we will be hosting a meeting and a conference with a lot of senior CEOs and leaders in the business community in an effort to, once again, better identify some of the things that West Virginia needs to do to advance economically. I am not going to stop until West Virginia is number one in the region. And as I've always said, if West Virginia starts to be number one with all the states that we touch, you will watch and see what it means in terms of moving up in the national economic rankings. But having this get together with a lot of top CEOs and people that care about West Virginia, many of them have been running big businesses and have huge presences in West Virginia. We'll have some new people as well. We're going to announce a date soon for that in March. But the goal is to get the business community engaged in this effort, because I'm always fond of saying we're going to win, but we win as a team. We win as a team. You're going to hear a lot about that in the upcoming weeks, months, and years ahead. And so I'm hopeful that we can get the business community and everyday citizens to be engaged here. At the end of the day, West Virginians deserve to have their taxpayer dollars spent wisely. I'm going to look out for them. And we also need to continually step up in the efforts to get everyone moving in the same direction. And that's what I'm committing to today. Very grateful that Todd is here. So that's our announcement for today. I have time for a few questions. I want to mention to you that next week we're going to be coming back again, and we'll probably be talking a little bit more about the budget, and we'll talk a little bit about some other questions and some things that we're learning as we go through the process. If I'm not mistaken, today is day 11. So I want to make sure that we're continuing to share with you all of the information we find. And so with that, I have time for a few questions.
Governor, the President's emergency executive order on energy would seem to be favorable to West Virginia in terms of coal, but a lot of the projects going on in the mid-Ohio Valley revolve around hydrogen. And some of that money, I think, that's gone into that, it's from green energy and the IRA and things that the President doesn't like. What's ahead for those things in West Virginia that look pretty good now, but
yeah,
we're depending on that kind of money to advance.
Well, look, I know that last week when I was in Washington, D.C., I talked to a number of the cabinet officials and members of the Trump administration, and they're eager to work with West Virginia. So I think there are a lot of different announcements that we're all going to unpack in terms of what it means for West Virginia. We'll be doing that. I can tell you this, though. West Virginia is looking to utilize all of its energy resources to move forward. And I do believe that the sum total of the Trump policies are going to be wildly beneficial for our state. In terms of any of the particulars, I think it's preliminary to say yet, because we still have to see some of the other announcements behind those proposals, executive orders, and I will look forward to doing that.
So, you talked about where we're at currently in terms of national rankings for business.
Sure.
Jim Justice invested pretty heavily for 8 years.
I'm sorry?
Jim Justice invested pretty heavily for 8 years into business and economic development in the state, and yet we're still bottom quartile of all of those things. What is different about this plan, and how do we switch what the trend has been?
So first of all, I think the important thing is we're not going to look back. We're going to build on strengths. There's been some positive things. I think I talked about the roads to prosperity, right? I want to level set with people about where we are, what we're inheriting, and then how we have to go forward. But I think you're going to see a level of vigor. You're going to see a level of dedication focused on competition that the state's never seen before. Now, every person brings something new to the table. I'm not going to criticize different approaches or get into a back and forth on that. I want to make sure that we're doing the best. One thing that we know about, competition. And you saw what we did down the hall, right, in terms of building large national coalitions to take out big issues of the day. We're going to continue to do that. And I think we're going to be very focused on that economic competition. That's why the first EOs that came out were focused on the backyard brawl. They were focused on reviewing all of the expenditures at a local level so we can institute discipline throughout the whole department and agency process. And I think that every time you have someone new come on board, it's helpful to do that, to kind of reset, refresh, and question things. Because we need to do that. The taxpayers deserve that. They deserve to have the close review of the budget. They deserve to have the close review of all of our taxes and all of our regulations and all of our licensing rules. And then we're going to provide that information to you. Obviously, we're in day 11, so we're still picking up a lot of information, but I am wildly optimistic about the future of our state, and I think that we're going to be able to do things that have not been achieved before. But I also want to acknowledge where we are. We have a lot of work to do, and we need Team West Virginia to step up and make that happen. Stephen?
Governor, obviously you're going to review all this with Mr. Johnston here and come back with us with some ideas. But I'm sure there's also some low-hanging fruit and some things that probably are already on the top of your mind that you may be able to affect now, even before the legislature session starts. What might be one or two of those things that are sort of low-hanging? Yeah,
so one of the things we're talking about is we've been in the middle of the permit review process. I think regulated business cares a lot about having streamlined applications and how long it takes to get permits approved. I think everyone can agree on that. So we've been in the process right now of reviewing that within the different departments so that we can report to you and say, here's how long on average we think it takes. Like some of those federal numbers, we know some of those federal programs, they could take 18 to 24 months. We know some of the 404 permits can happen just within a few months. So what I want to do is bring that to your attention and show and say, now this is a federal piece of the equation, this is the state piece of the equation, and we're going to be able to talk to the legislature about statutory changes needed on the state level, and we'll be writing the federal government. But I would say that the permit approval process, I want West Virginia to be known as the best in the country. We have a lot of construction projects coming out. We have a lot of things going on. I want to make sure that we're moving with the right speed. So I would say permit review and permit approval process, accelerating permits, I think that's going to be really, really important. That's one area. But as I mentioned, we also in the first batch of announcements talked about the comparison of all the regulations and the licensing rules. We believe they're going to have a number of specific examples from that, but we're still in the compilation stage. So it'd be premature to kind of break that news until we get it. But you have the EOs and the deadlines. You hold us to our word, because when I come up here, I want to provide you with facts, as I always have in every presser, and everything we say factually, we can back up. Curtis.
Sir, I always think about that person at home that's going to be watching my broadcast that may not understand the nature of permits and everything like that. They hear you talking about competing with other states. They hear you talking about an appointee today to your administration to help do this. And what I think they wonder is, what specifically are they going to see happen because of today's announcement?
Well, I think that when people understand the basics of competition, right? So we've talked a lot about the backyard brawl. People get that there are two teams that get on a field, they play really hard, and there are winners and losers in the economic arena. I want to make sure that we're winning compared to all the states that we touch. What does that mean? I want to start to see our standard of living go up. So if the average family of four has more take-home pay, or if there are better economic opportunities for them, because we can actually get things done, that means commerce, the pace of commerce increases. When the pace of commerce increases, it becomes much more attractive for more businesses to come in. That means more jobs, less unemployment, the ability to attract more people here to expand the tax revenue. Why is it important to expand the base where taxes are applied? So that every individual citizen in our state has lower taxes, more take-home pay. That means they can go out to restaurants, they can go out to shop for clothing, they can take care of their kids the right way. We're always looking at the bottom line impact on West Virginians, and that's certainly a very critical part of today's announcement.
But how does today's announcement move that forward?
So, as I indicated, energy is a very significant part of our state's economy, and I think we're going to really lead our comeback in part through the vast energy resources that we have. So looking at this from a cross-cutting perspective, when you're looking at what's done through the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Transportation, Commerce, Economic Development, the Governor's Office, having the ability to look across the board means we look for more efficiencies, we look for more job opportunities. What that does is it opens up more opportunities for good-paying jobs for people, where they can make more money. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And if we can actually bring better efficiencies to the government, that also means that taxpayers pay less. Remember, I still very much believe that West Virginia needs to have the lowest income tax of all the states that we touch. Everything we do is about expanding growth and job opportunities. If we do that, all West Virginians are going to benefit in that economic opportunity. Jordan.
So, thank you. I remember last week when we were speaking, you said that we're projected to be in a $400 million deficit for fiscal year 2026.
Yeah.
But then, looking back, I realized that former Governor Jim Justice said that, we were doing well, at least towards the end of his term, that he was saying that there was going to be a surplus of funds. And I know that a big focus for you is economic development. So
Sure.
can you talk a little bit more, where are we really at as a
Yeah.
state, since we kind of heard both, and how do you and Mr. Johnson, plan
Yeah.
to continue to propel the state forward
Absolutely.
in relation to that?
Well, first of all, everything we said last week is, of course, factual and correct. We're going to get to more of that next week as we talk about that. But one of the things that's important is we're looking to address issues, whether it's the budget, we're looking to make sure that we have structurally sound budgets, right? So when we have continuous programs, for the most part, they're funded by continuous revenue across the board. I mentioned last week we wanted to reduce our reliance on one-shot revenue. Of course there's money available. Yes, there's over $1 billion in the rainy day fund, but of course you don't tap into it for day-to-day needs, right? So what you're going to see is we're going to build on a lot of the positive things that are being done. I think that the focus of this administration is fixing the fundamental issues so we can compete, because the truth is we don't have the same resources to go out and simply say, well, we have this pile of a couple $1 billion that came in from the feds and we're going to spend it. We now have the ability to do the hard work to make sure that we're competing on tax issues, on regulation issues, on education issues, and many other different topics. So I think that everything you're going to see is focused on economic growth and then beginning to build out a structurally sound budget that I think people are going to be proud of. Ma'am?
So I was super curious, how does your economic approach address labor availability and workforce challenges faced by businesses in the state?
It's a great question. So we're planning to, in the upcoming weeks, we'll be making some additional announcements on that. But I've talked a lot over the last few years about the importance of workforce participation. And anyone who's, I think, followed all the debates and the public meetings I've had, I've actually said increasing workforce participation is the #1 issue that we have to address. And so one of the ways that we do that is to better address the fundamentals in terms of the taxation, the regulation. If you make things even more attractive, we're going to have more people coming into our state. We have to increase the migration into West Virginia. Now, there have been some positive things. You've had more people coming in, but we still have more deaths than births here in our state. We have to change that fundamental and have additional population growth and additional workforce growth. There's going to be a very concentrated effort for all the departments to be zeroing in on that area, and I think you're going to be seeing in the upcoming weeks some very specific announcements in terms of workforce development. We're looking forward to working with the legislature on various items, as I've talked about in the past, on recruitment and retention and building out our VOTEC capacity. That's something that's important with all the skilled tradesmen that we need, because we have needs for electricians and contractors and plumbers and so many different positions. So this is going to be a really big initiative that you'll continue to hear more about, but every department gets to participate in that process, and I'm excited about that. Leah?
Thanks, Governor.
Sure.
Going back to what you were saying earlier about the budget,
Yeah.
is there an example that you can think of to kind of illustrate this for people of a reoccurring expense that maybe has been paid for historically with one-time money?
Well, I'll give you an example. I know that we heard that there was going to be a need for a supplemental to address some of the issues that are coming out, the revenue that's needed out of Homeland Security. And the money is set to expire, or is set to run out by about March. So we're going to be going and talking about those issues. And that wasn't funded fully through in terms of the general revenue applications requiring money to be added before we even get to the end of the fiscal year. I've also talked about issues like PEIA, where I believe I said last week that just to address some of the base issues, not even getting to fixes that we're talking about, that there was a $62 million hole there that's really not accounted for. So I give you those as examples, but obviously I want to focus. Next week, we're going to come back, we're going to talk again. Today, the biggest takeaway is West Virginia is developing a growth plan. There's going to be an energy strategy, energy policy, a focus on competitiveness, a focus on growth in a way that you haven't seen before by fixing the fundamentals. And I think that's central to having long-term economic success. I think I have time for 2 more questions.
Can you, Mr. Johnson is going to lead this. Can he tell us a little bit about himself, or can you?
Sure. I'm going to absolutely let one of my all-stars talk. Go ahead.
Thank you. From Southern Virginia originally. Worked in state government for a while, and then for industry, for a number of trade associations, and in the federal government, in the Senate and in the House of Representatives of staff on various committees. I guess the common thread running through my background is a focus on energy, infrastructure, and environmental policy issues, which is kind of central to some of the things that the governor is asking me to do.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you're doing some regional collaborations. Are there any specific state leadership that you've
Is there any specific one? I didn't hear you.
Any specific state leadership that you've already reached out to in other regional collaborations?
So I'm reaching my way around. Obviously, I've talked with Governor Youngkin in the past, and I had a conversation with Governor Shapiro, and we're talking about different collaboration. We're not here to announce any specific initiatives yet, but it is my intent to have good working relationships with all of the governors around. And I'm fortunate that I work closely also with Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio. He was a former Attorney General. Governor Beshears of Kentucky, former Attorney General. We worked very closely together when I served as Attorney General. I expect that we'll do so, and obviously we'll be working closely with Maryland as well. So we've begun that process, and I'm expecting that there'll be a lot of opportunity for regional collaboration. When it makes sense to work together regionally, we do that. You know I can tell you a story on the campaign trail that I was down in Mingo County, and then we were visiting in Pike County, and a lot of the demographics, the challenges in Kentucky in that area are very similar to what's going on in Mingo County, and there are opportunities for states to work together. You want to look for those opportunities. Same with other regions of the state where we have some similar challenges. So certainly I'm looking forward to working, collaborating with folks. And I am excited by the Trump administration, a lot of the picks, and I'm very hopeful that we'll see a number of the cabinet come in and visit in West Virginia over time. I think I have time for one more question. My friend.
Yes, sir. Governor, to get back to the executive order from the president, the new core plant in Mason County, part of the funding was through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. TIMET, Berkshire Hathaway up in Ravenswood came through the Inflation Reduction Act. It seems like the executive orders may have frozen some of the funding for that. Are you all talking to the Trump administration? Because those are key blocks to build our economy in West Virginia.
Yeah, no, we are having conversations with Trump administration already, but I think you're going to see more and more. Part of it is unpacking what all these changes in the regulations do. And also we encourage people who are benefiting from those to reach out to us, right? There are a lot of different entities that they should be reaching out so we can have additional lines of communication. I'm fond of telling my team, I always want more information rather than less, right? Get information our way. So of course we're going to be working together with the Trump administration and all of the entities who have ongoing business concerns in the state. So thank you. Guys, we're going to come back next week. I want to thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.